Right. Namaste and Hari Om. This is your host Kishor Trivedi welcoming you to today's episode of Know Your Dharma. This program, this podcast is supported by the Hindu Society of North Carolina and Bharat TV. Today we have a very special guest, young college student Maithili Kulkarni, who is going to tell us about her journey through Dharma and also about the Gita Pariksha that she aced recently. That Pariksha took place at the Hindu Society of North Carolina, sponsored by or conducted by the Hindu University of America. But before we do the interview chat, let's have a prayer first.
Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarva Karyeshu Sarvada. And the translation is, O Bhagwan Shri Ganesha, of large body, curved trunk, with the brilliance of 10 million suns, please make all my undertakings free of obstacles always.
And it's very appropriate because Ganesh Chaturthi is coming up. And so, Hari Om, Maithili, please give us a brief introduction about yourself first.
Sure. So I'm currently a third year studying in Chapel Hill. I study neuroscience and Spanish as my majors, and I have a minor in chemistry.
Very good. So tell us about any of your favorite, tell us about your journey through Dharma and how you started it and how you sustained it and so on.
So I was first introduced to the concept of Dharma by my father when I was quite young. Both my parents are very religious, so we often did many pujas, many artis, many prayers, and I was always partaking in celebrations, Hindu celebrations, and doing all the rituals and watching them around the house as they did their prayers in the morning. And as I've grown up, they've included me more and more and taught me how to do more and more things and the meaning behind everything. So I think that's a big part of how my introduction to Dharma has been sustained through Hindu culture and celebrations.
But it's all at home. You didn't participate in Sanskar Gurukul and Bal Vihar or anything like that?
I participated in Sanskar Gurukul when I was in high school. So that it was a later experience for me, middle school and high school, I'd say. But I think more than that, I think my parents had the biggest impact on me.
You're very lucky to have parents that you have. I know your father and I know a little bit your mother as well as your aunt. And so wonderful family, wonderful, very lucky to have that family. So can you tell us about any of the scriptures that is a favorite of yours?
Yeah, so growing up, I always I was always told all the stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana by my grandmother. She loves reading all the scriptures. She made it a point that every night before I went to bed, whenever I was with her, she would always read me a story or tell me some story. And along with that, my parents also told me a lot about the epics and mythology, Hindu mythology. So I learned a lot about my culture from that, and also from religiously just going to the temple. I was surrounded by a lot of Hindu influence.
Very good. Now you use the word mythology. Now I try to steer people away from that word because if you look at the word myth, so it says that all this never happened, right? And we do believe that Bhagwan Ram, Bhagwan Krishna did come down on earth, and all these are stories that are, you can say, almost historical. So I try to use scriptures and or itihas or something like that rather than mythology. That's an aside. Now, is there any particular story that is favorite of yours that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories is of Balakrishna. And it goes like this. When he was quite young, he was a big troublemaker, known to be a very big troublemaker. And he would always mess around and always bother people. And that made people very mad at him sometimes, including his mother Yashoda. So one time, he was messing around, just giving his mother some trouble, and she kept telling him to stop. And of course, he did not listen. So eventually she got so fed up with him that she tied him. She tied him up so that he couldn't move and he couldn't bother her. And he kept getting loose somehow, and she was very confused. And eventually, I think he started eating some dirt or something, and she was furious. She was very mad at him for doing that. And so she grabbed his hand, she brushed the dirt off and opened his mouth to see, like to take out the dirt. And he opened his mouth, and when she looked into his mouth, she saw the entire universe. And she was astounded. She saw his true power and the divinity that he held. That was one of my favorites.
That's a beautiful story, a beautiful story. And of course, if I remember correctly, then Yashoda was made to forget. Otherwise, then she will not be able to treat him like a regular
That's
child,
fine.
which is what she
Yeah.
wanted to do. So that is a Vishwarupa Darshan, and it happens again in Bhagavad Gita,
Yes.
Arjun.
In
Um,
Adhyay 11, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And of course, there are meanings behind all these stories that someday we might want to explore further. Is there a specific verse that you like to sing for our audience from the scriptures that you like?
Yes, yeah, there is one. One of the shlokas from the Bhagavad Gita that stood out the most to me was from the 16th Adhyay when I was learning it with my father. So it's 1621. It goes like this. Tribidhan narakasyedan dwaran nashanam kama krodha tatha lobhas tasmade tatrin tyajit. And in essence, it means that there are three gates that lead to hell and to self-destruction of the being. And these three gates are lust, anger, and greed. So therefore, one must abandon all three.
Very good, very good. Now, while growing up in US as a Hindu, were there any difficulties, discrimination, wanting to be part of the crowd rather than somewhat different? So, can you share whether in high school or even earlier, primary and middle school, and later in college, can you share any difficulties you have had and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think most of the difficulties I had were in my formative years as a little girl. As I've grown up, I think I've found people who are eager to learn about my culture and my background, um, and who don't harbor any sort of disgust or hatred towards where I'm from. But I remember I actually wrote one of my college essays on this. But when I think I was in middle school, and I just brought some Indian food to lunch, as I usually did. Um, and one of my friends, one of the girls that was sitting next to me, she made some very rude comments about my food. She was like, "Oh, what is this? Like, it looks like there's bugs in your food. Like, your food is disgusting." And obviously, since then, that was quite a memorable event for me. And after that, for some time, I tried to shy away and tried to hide from my culture. I told my mom, like, "Oh, don't give me Indian food anymore. Like, that's not cool. I don't want it. Give me like sandwiches or pasta or something easy to eat instead." Um, And so for so many years, I avoided bringing Indian food to school at all costs. Um, and I felt like I had to hide a lot of my identity, and the things that I grew up with. So it was pretty difficult because for some time, just because of that one comment, I was pretty ashamed about my background, and I found myself wishing that my name was easier to say, or I ate like normal people food. And it was very it was a pretty bad experience, but I think as the years went on, I kind of rediscovered my love for my country, my religion, and everything that I grew up with. I started to form my own opinions on it as I grew older, and I had a little bit of a more objective viewpoint. So
Very good. Yeah. So one aspect is food, clearly. And I remember when our daughters went to school, they wanted peanut butter jelly sandwich, nothing else. And
yeah.
many, many years ago, when there were very, very, very few Indian kids, whereas these days, even when you grew up, there were more Indian kids in your class than certainly my daughters had. Is that correct or no?
Yeah, I think there were more Indian kids.
So certainly food is one issue. But the second issue could be, I don't know, that textbooks, I think maybe 10th grade textbook, there is some information about India and Hinduism, generally very negative portrayal. So that
Yeah.
could be another reason for being discriminated against. Did you feel any of that along the way?
Yeah, so I did notice that a lot of the time when I was in my history classes, and the topic came to India, instead of the vast amount of culture that we had and still have, and many of the celebrations that we hold and all of our beliefs and everything, the main focus immediately goes to the caste system. So I think that people had a generally negative view of Indians and that they were derogatory towards other people and held values that weren't acceptable, even though there's so much more to our culture and to our beings.
So, yeah, I have gone many times to the schools to talk about the beautiful aspects of Hinduism, and we need to somehow make kids aware or the teachers aware that there are resources available like that. And at the same time, textbooks need to change. And there have been efforts by organizations such as Hindu American Foundation and Kohana that try to make the modifications to the information in the textbooks. But it is a uphill battle because there are a lot of opposition to that. So, but yes, but we need to make your friends, younger friends who are in schools, aware that in our community there are resources available, like me and many others, who can go and talk about Hinduism, what real Hinduism is, not just the caste system that the textbooks talk about. So, is there any other comment on that aspect, or?
Nothing else off the top of my head.
So now let's get to the Bhagavad Gita, which is what you participated in. So tell us about your interest in Bhagavad Gita, and how did you hear about it, and about your experience, which inspired you to take this pariksha. Of course, I know the answer. Your dad is very much involved in it, but still, your view.
Sure. So I was first introduced to the Gita when I was probably like 6 or 7 years old. That was my first introduction. And my father had just like one small task for me to memorize the 12th adhyay.
Beautiful, Bhakti Yoga.
Bhakti Yoga, yes.
And the beauty about that is, apart from anything else, that it is all in Anushtup Chand. Many other adhyayas have a mixture of Anushtup and Trishtup. And switching from one to the other in singing or chanting is harder. Whereas this one is all Anushtup Chand.
Yes, yeah. So I started out with that. So every night we sat down for maybe like 45 minutes to an hour, and every day I memorized one shlok. So over the course of, I think it might have been like 1 month total, month and a half, I memorized that 12th adhyay.
Very
Of
good.
course, as my studies picked up, I stopped and I forgot it. However, recently I just got back into it. It's been a few years now, and my father actually holds classes. So every Sunday, we meet, and if I'm at school, I meet on Zoom. If I'm at home, I come in person. But every Sunday we meet for the class, and for the past maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, I've been learning and memorizing more and more adhyayas. So I currently have the 12th adhyay, 15th adhyay, 16th adhyay, and I'm doing the 17th adhyay right now.
Wonderful, wonderful. So particularly about pariksha then?
Pariksha, I heard about the pariksha through my dad. So he told me that there was one happening, and he told me it would be a good way for me to practice what I've been learning through the classes and through what I know about history and religion. So I decided that I might as well take a part in it. And it was only one day. Honestly, I didn't study for more than one day for it, because I think my foundation from what I had learned from my father was pretty strong.
Very good, very good. And you won the top prize. So tell us how you felt about that.
It was definitely a surprise, and a big honor. It feels really nice to be recognized by such a large community. And honestly, I didn't know about this. I didn't know that the Gita Pariksha existed until maybe last month, the week before, 2 weeks before the Pariksha. And I think it was a great experience overall. The studying the night before was a little bit stressful, but the day of the Pariksha, everything went smoothly, and I was able to use my resources from all of the previous years of studying.
Very good. So do you have any idea how to increase the awareness about beauty of Hindu Dharma among youths like you, and then of course the Gita in particular and Gita Pariksha in particular? Now, I find that a lot of people don't have access to parents like yours, right? That are very learned and are very interested in passing this on to their children. So what do they do? How do they? Can you at school at UNC, right? Can you start a group if there is none to learn about Dharma and Bhagavad Gita, or generally about Dharma? Can you spread awareness and increase the number of people who are exposed to the? I find it's very beautiful, and it's unfortunate that people don't know, and those who know very negatively, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you make a great point, but in my opinion, I think that for someone like me, someone who is still a student, and I'm still learning, and I have much more to learn than people such as my father, who has memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita. He knows the meaning behind all the shlokas. I feel that someone with my skill level is definitely not well equipped enough to be able to teach other people when I'm still learning. But I think that if we find someone who is willing to give some time, maybe an hour or 2 hours out of their week, to maybe hold a class or a lecture, maybe on campus, maybe on Zoom or something like that, then that would be really beneficial.
So first of all, I used to feel the same way. Your father knows a lot more than I ever will, right? But I still feel that I should be teaching whatever little I know. And in fact, I got support from some, I don't remember exactly which verse in Bhagavad Gita, that it's okay that if you don't know everything, and yet you can teach a little bit, right? So that's number one. Number two, there are resources available, right? So if somebody wants to know, you can either show them the books themselves, very good translations of Bhagavad Gita, for example, by Mukundanand that you got as a prize, or by Ekanathishwaran. Beautiful, simple words translation. Ekanathishwaran is a 3-volume series, which is meant for young people in US, in the Western world. Beautiful translations. And then you can point them out to various YouTube videos by somebody like Swami Sarvapriyanandji of Ramakrishna Mission. Or you can, we have this chaplain at Duke, right? Priya Amresh, and she has every Thursday a session, and we can request it that can be put on Zoom, and you gather people at UNC in a room and get tap on the Zoom session from Priyaji. Priyaji is not born here, but brought up in US, born in India, brought up in US, very well learned, and very tuned to the young people. She has sons and daughters college age, and she's dealing with college kids every day, right? So there are resources available. So you may not directly teach, but you can be a conduit or a bridge to the resources, right?
For sure, for sure.
And not only that particular aspect, namely Dharma in general, but Gita in particular and Gita Pariksha in particular. We will be doing this annually, right? So, and I and your dad will be involved with it. And so we expect you to help us attract more youth to the Pariksha itself. And before the Pariksha, there is a class that was held by Kalika Uttarkarji from HUA, which can be accessed to prepare for the Pariksha. So next year, not only we would expect you to do that, but also volunteer at the Pariksha, like the 2 people who got the prize last year were recruited this year by me to help volunteering. Sudiksha Tota and Shashank, both of them came. And I don't know whether you remember, they conducted the session before lunch.
Yeah, I do.
So is there any parting message that you will want to pass on to our audience, either about being a Hindu kid in US, your journey to Dharma, or Gita Pariksha, or Gita, whatever else you can think of?
Yeah, so I think something to hold on to is that the Gita is pretty much your guidebook to life, right?
Manual, right? As
Manual.
somebody had said the other day.
Yes, manual. And so to be a good person, to lead your life in the best way that you can, following the Gita, reading the Gita is really helpful, and it's always applicable no matter how old you are or how young you are. There's always stuff to take away from it. And even now, when I go over the meaning of the adhyayas that I've already learned, I find that I pick up on smaller things that I didn't notice before, and newer things stick in my mind. So I really do think it's a great resource, and it's available everywhere online. There's many translations, so I think it really is invaluable, especially to me as a student, someone who is still finding her way in life.
Sure, most people used to think that Gita is to be read after you retire, but in fact, it should be read when you are young, so that your life can be guided by the manual of life in some sense. And as you pointed out, there are beautiful translations, particularly the modern ones, like Ekanathishwaran's or Mukundanand and Dayanand Saraswati, very modern translations that you should use and access. So thank you very much, Maithili, for taking your time from your busy schedule at college to do this interview. But before we conclude, let's do the prayer.
Sure. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kachit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The translation to the shlok is Om, may all be happy, may all be free from illness, may all see what is auspicious, may no one suffer. Om, peace, peace, peace.
You know, the word survey in that particular verse is a very important word. It means all beings. There is no restriction. It's not talking about only Hindus or only Indians or anything like that. All beings, not just all living beings, not just all human beings. So it's a very, very broad, and that is the spirit of Hinduism that is conveyed by this simple verse. Once again, thank you very much, Maithili, and
Thank you for
the
having me.
audience. Hari Om and Namaste.
Namaste.